idea. This is not just some hot take that I have. It's been around for like 30 some odd years in the public eye. And so what is no estimates, you might be asking? So it's pretty simple. Everything is 0 points. You just don't point. And what does this actually do? If velocity is something that is causing your team a lot of stress, take that out of the equation. It doesn't mean anything. Velocity doesn't bring user value. The only thing that it does is it brings pain. We saw that picture a few seconds ago. The important things that you want to be measuring are throughput. What kind of features can we develop for the end user, for our client, whoever it is? That's the thing that they actually care about. That's the reason why we're here. And so then you're asking yourself, like, well, how does this actually impact my team? Your backlog gets prioritized by the business value. That's the thing that like you're actually thinking about all the time. Not capacity. You're not worried about like what fits into the sprint. How do we do what? The most important thing lives at the top, and everything else falls below it. Because if you're doing it the other way, a lot of the time, this is what ChatGPT and I also think that product managers do a lot of the times with sprints. They try and do sprint planning, and they're trying to fit things together. And like, let's just say like you have a velocity of 10 and you're sticking these stories in here and you've got, okay, well this next feature has like 3 tickets, there are 3 points, that leaves us with 9, and then we have 1 left over, so I guess we can do a chore in here too. And it's this weird sort of math problem to figure out exactly what's gonna happen, when in reality, the most important thing should be the top priority. I think everybody, would agree on that, just very generally speaking. And so if we take away velocity, that's not something we have to think about. Political biases aside, this is a really great quote from Robert McNamara. He says, measure what is important, don't make important what you can measure. I think it's a really cool one. Velocity is a number that we look at a lot. Points are a number that we look at a lot. But they don't mean anything inherent. They may indicate to somebody what complexity might be or the level of effort and the time that we think that something actually might take. But overall, it really doesn't mean a whole lot. It's just a number that we can report on, which is why it ends up getting talked about so often. And so at this point, you may be asking yourself, is NoEstimates right for me? I'll let you sit with that for a second, but I can tell you the answer, and the answer is yes. The answer is yes. It is. It is right for you. But maybe it's right for you. Maybe not. There's a... You could also throw the baby out with the bathwater on this one. Estimation is valuable when it helps you make a significant decision. Martin Fowler's one of the dudes who was on that slide before, the headshots. There is definitely value in estimation at certain points in time, but how much value we put on estimation and overvaluing that process can lead to other consequences. So these are some considerations you might want to take into account. And the first one I think might be the one that's the most important, really. Do you need to make estimation-informed decisions? There's a couple cases here that you can think about, but probably the first one is let's just say you're a freelancer and you're working with a client who has a very specific budget. You definitely need to provide them an estimate. Do not go to them and say, oh, well, it might just take whatever. They know how much money they can spend. You will probably lose that gig. Definitely give them an estimate. Another case might be if you're working with multiple teams on a larger project and somebody's depending on you, let's just say you're the back-end team and you're working with the front-end team, and the front-end team needs to know when the API endpoint's going to be available for them to hit this. Don't be a jerk and just say, it'll get done when it gets done. No, let them know it's going to take a month so that they can actually go and do something else, and then you can come back to this. But just because those cases may come up doesn't necessarily mean that you should also just be estimating everything. Again, there's the spectrum here that you can work within. The case that we were talking about earlier, where velocity is something that gets talked about by project leads, by project managers, velocity can be weaponized against you. There are definitely many bad work environments where that happens, where people are beholden to very strict consequences or very strict parameters in a given sprint. If you commit to something, people hold you to that. You don't want that. If that's happening on your team, it's a really good opportunity for you to take velocity out of the equation, and people don't have to think about it. At my company, that's something that actually happens on many different contracts. So Fearless is a government contractor. I know a bunch of people who work directly with work with the Air Force, and they don't use velocity for this exact reason, because people expect something out of that number. And another thing to think about here is if your team is mature enough where your task size is fairly consistent already, you basically are kind of doing no estimates already. If every ticket that you have is 2 or 3 points or something like that, in a really good, healthy environment, your product team and your development team are working together, and over time, like your product team is writing tickets that are about right sized for your dev team. So in those circumstances, like if you've got consistent work already, what's the point in pointing? What are you really gaining from that? So I would argue just get an hour back in your week. If this is of interest to you at all, highly recommend these 2 blog posts. There's a lot more about it. There's a couple books, but the Martin Fowler blog post and the one by Ron Jeffries are top-notch. Highly recommend. And that basically brings me to time. I'll take any questions that you have, and I'll do my best to answer. Yes?
So are you basically saying that the ideal situation is having no timeline?
No, not necessarily no timeline, no. You can still predict a timeline. And this is probably the biggest pushback that like a lot of like PMs or product people will actually like argue about this. It's like, I can't plan. You can plan. In this environment, sort of like the same thing I was saying about like kind of like this last item. If you're in a team where your task size is consistent, you develop that still. You can still right size tasks in this whole process. And with that, they'll know roughly like, okay, we can get this many tasks done in a given period of time. But you'll also probably be achieving your goals quicker too, because the things that are important are at the very top of the backlog, always. You're not going to be trying to like fit things into sprints. Your team should be able to actually turn things over quicker, and they still will have that benefit of knowing roughly how many tasks we can get done in a given period of time. But we take velocity out as a measure of that. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Probably the other way to...
I guess my main question was just, like, are you advocating for just allowing every project to just sort of develop its own timeline based on the project, like, as necessary? I mean, I guess, like, as it develops, like,
yeah.
Like, so maybe if one project you just get it out in a week, and then one project you can't quite come to it, so it takes you 3 months. Like, I guess, are you kind of advocating for just like, I don't know, just like a very project-specific timeline? I guess like a project-independent timeline where there's no generality.
I think I'm following what you're saying. I'm not advocating for anarchy for sure.
Because I think that is a valid argument. I mean, I know some projects I've worked on, you just finish them in a week. And then there's some that they just can't quite get there. You know what I mean? So
I think I follow what you're saying. I'm not trying to say there's no accountability or anything like that, but putting hard parameters and using velocity as a way to kind of like encourage things to get done, I think is a flaw that we get out of Scrum. I think it's probably the worst thing that happens in a lot of environments. But I mean, that is like what you're describing, where like a task that, the whole point of estimation is like, we're just guessing. We don't really know how long something is going to take, and a given item might take a week or 3 weeks, and there's really no way of knowing.
Just one last thing before I don't take a lot of time. I guess I work with like very small companies and very large companies, and there's sort of an interesting dynamic where in a very small company you can work on a project for as long as you kind of want to, but then at a medium company you have more expectations. But like, I guess Fearless is a large company where you could tell a client theoretically, like, we just don't know when it's going to be done. So you guys have the flexibility to sort of pick the timeline. So I guess I'm just asking you specifically, like, what's your thoughts on sort of a very, very flexible timeline is? Because, a small company, like you said, a freelancer might not have that flexibility. They can't say, oh, it might just, I don't know when it's going to be done. You know what I mean? Like, but Fearless could.
To a degree. I mean, like, I still, like I said, I'm leading a team right now. I still am like beholden to like certain like things like PI planning. Like, I have to know what we're going to get done in a given quarter. Like, and there's that kind of like level of planning that's still happening. But down to the sprint level, like imposing so many restrictions on individuals, like just for really no reason at all, aside from today's Wednesday, it's the end of the sprint. Like, you can remove some of that tension. But if you're curious, I'm happy to talk to you more later too. Yeah.
If you're not leading a team, how would you go about slowly implementing this into the team?
I am leading a team, and I'm having a really hard time implementing it. You have to have buy-in. I mean, that's kind of the whole thing. You really have to have like a willing product manager who's kind of going to be willing to go to bat for you on this. But once they kind of get to the point where they understand, like, okay, what we're delivering on, like the things that we're delivering on are far more important than these numbers, and they can emphasize that correctly, then it's really not that hard of a sell a lot of the time too. Particularly when you can say to somebody that like, by doing this, we're going to get more stuff done. They may ask you how, and like where's the accountability in that, and it does take a little bit of trust. But just the same way, like it takes like a couple sprints to actually like calculate a velocity or a consistent velocity. The same thing is happening here, and if they don't like it, you can always go back. But I think it's worth considering. So you just have to have like somebody who's willing to take a little bit of like, or view it with a little bit of empathy. But yeah.
So if you already have, say you wanted to try it like for a couple of sprints, even just like a small amount of time.
Yeah.
But that's still already pre-planned, like 2 months in advance. How would you suggest that, like at the beginning of the planning period, or?
Yeah, I mean, I brought it up in like a retro once, and it started a lot of discussion, and that seemed to be a good format. Yeah. Is that my
Well, that's the last question. Thank you, though.
Yeah. Thanks, guys.
Yeah. All right. Up next is Daniel.
Hi, I'm Daniel. Irowa-Omoregie. I'm a physician from Nigeria. Currently also a Carry MBA student. I've done next month, so final weeks. I have a few questions for people here. How many of us in the room tonight are technical people? You can code or you're scientists? Okay. How many people are taking a business class? Fewer hands. Right. And then also want a general opinion. What company would you say is the most innovative company in the world right now? Apple? Tesla? Okay. Then my last question. How many people in the room tonight like MBA? Like MBA grads, like MBAs, like those people?
Oh, wait,
Yeah. How many people like MBAs, like business people? Yeah. And that's sad because I'm an MBA and no one likes, well, a few people like me. Well, yeah, so today I'm just going to be talking about, why technical people and business people need to work together to see startup success. And we're talking about yin and yang, talk about case study and see how we can find balance, right? So your technology is your tool, is your solution. Your technology is what sparkles, right? Technology is what excites all of us. Growing up, I wanted to be a technical person. I wanted to be a scientist. I eventually went to medical school. You could say I'd be a bit of a scientist that way, but I never really got to build things until I got out of medical school, right? And there are a ton of us here who are looking to build. We're really excited with things we've studied. Perhaps a few of us are PhDs. Some of us have masters. Some of us self-taught developers. But you have your technology and the heart of your innovation. You're solving problems, or you aim to solve problems in new ways. You aim to develop disruptive ideas that will shape up new markets, and you aim to have that wow factor. And this is what most of the successful technology companies have done. My case study here is Tesla. Tesla is seen as one of the most innovative companies, right? Valentine mentioned Tesla as his most innovative company. But one of the things that a lot of people don't think about when they talk about Tesla is the fact that it took a long time for Tesla to achieve this growth, right? Elon got into the board of Tesla sometime in 2004, became CEO in 2008, yet we didn't start to see astronomical sales until sometime in 2018. Even though we think Tesla is a very innovative company, it took a while for Tesla to actually start making waves in the market, despite having Elon, one of the most successful salesmen in the world. I don't see Elon as a successful technical person. He's very smart and he's technical, but I see him as the most successful salesperson in the world today. And that's what your technology is. Your technology is that wow factor. Your technology is what brings people to want to invest in you. Your technology is what you're passionate about. It's what will bring change. But a lot of the time, you find that you have the most innovative technologies still failing. And why is that? And that's because a lot of the time you fail to find the strength of business. We see that in the space of VCs, they say, well, most startups fail. 90% of startups will fail. Some people tell you 75%, some people tell you it's 50% of startups that are going to fail. And most of the time you find it's because people fail to find a product market fit. You have this really innovative solution. I'm not sure if anyone knows the first electric car, but Tesla wasn't actually the first company to build an electric car. It was built sometime in the 90s, I think, if I'm not wrong. I actually saw the electric car in the Museum of American History. But why didn't an electric car kick off when it kicked off? Why didn't it succeed? Why is Tesla the first company to really go mainstream? 3 things. The timing. As at the time Tesla went mainstream, people started becoming more conscious about sustainability, the effect of fossil fuels, and they had a great salesperson. So they only didn't find the perfect market fit. They also had a business model that was successful at the right time. I don't know if anyone has seen this review. This is MKBHD's review of the Humane AI pin. And it was really interesting to me when I saw the backlash of the community, innovative tech community, on MKBHD when they released this review of the product. And I'm pretty sure a lot of us here have seen the Humane AI pin. It had a really great founding team. When you're building a startup, one of the most important things to VCs is the quality of your founding team. The Humane AI pin team has former Apple staff, right? So they have the pedigree, they've been innovative, they really know how to work with technology. It's a very innovative device, if I do say so myself. It's a wearable device, really small pin. It has a camera, it has a projector. You're putting together really incredible stuff in a small device with AI. It's meant to be incredible. Despite that, there's a lot of backlash in the current space of reviews. There's a lot of backlash from possible users. And when you look at the market challenges that such a device is facing, despite the innovative features that it has, you see that there is a complex interaction using this product compared to the status quo, which is your mobile phone. Imagine having to be in this room right now and have a projector projecting onto my hand. I'm talking to a device on my body. People will probably look at me like, okay, wait, what's going on with this dude, right? There's also the part of the financial part of getting that device. You pay $700 cost to acquire a device, and at the same time, the company is expecting you to start spending $24 every month, and you still have to pay for data subscription, right? So one of the main things that a lot of people fail to think about when developing businesses based on the technologies, especially for scientists who you've done a PhD, for example, you spent 5-6 years doing a PhD, you're really passionate about your technology, you want to make change, you want to find value in what you've done and find a purpose for your life, you're really passionate about it and you're trying to build a solution, is we tend to get really stuck on our technology, we tend to be really stuck on the solution that we're bringing to the market. Being in the Hopkins ecosystem, I've seen a lot of great startup slide decks, pitch decks, and I see really innovative solutions, really great problems people are trying to solve. But then I try to find the business model slide, and it's probably one slide that doesn't have a lot of well thought out information, there's not really great business models, and people just feel like, well, I have this great solution, I have this great technology, I'm going to solve this problem, I'm going to change the world. But you could have the most innovative solution in the world and have nobody to pay for it. Larry is building in Africa. I've also built a startup in Nigeria at the time. I came in, wanted to build a healthcare marketplace in Nigeria. Health insurance is a big problem in Nigeria. No one seems to be able to solve it. And we came in, built this, did the survey, we talked to users, we talked to funders. They're like, oh, we're going to pay for this product. Users say we're going to use this product. You build it and then realize, oh, wait, I didn't think about the fact that the policy landscape at the time doesn't really support my solution. It's just not yet the time for my solution. A lot of people see Apple as one of the most innovative companies in the world, but at the same time, so people will tell you Apple isn't innovative. Apple just takes, a feature from one of the Android phone makers and fine-tunes it. And that's because Apple has realized at the state that they're in, they're a big company. They don't really need to push the most crazy ideas out there in the world. They can sit back, they can wait and fine-tune your solution, right? So the importance of having this business skills, business mindset, and also being friends with MBAs. I'm not saying everyone should go get an MBA, but I noticed that there was a trend in the innovative space of technical people not liking business people not really liking technical people. But the truth is, we both need each other to succeed. If you're not able to find product market fit, you're not able to really understand what your user needs. And at the same time, if you have the most technical knowledge and you can't really translate your technical knowledge to the simplest form, right? I don't know how many people here have taken a business communication class, for example. It teaches you how to really dumb these technical things down. And when I was taking my business communications class, I had this really great project to work on. and the founder was literally clueless. She had gotten almost $1 million in funding, but she still really couldn't translate the solution she was trying to put out there in the world, the basic terms that the average person would understand. So really the essence today of this conversation is to, just have this take home of finding the right balance between being passionate about, your technological savviness, your technical vision, and your business strategy, because you could build the most innovative tool, you could build the most innovative solution, but if you don't have your fundamental problem solving right, and at the same time ensuring that you have your business model that would help you scale, that would help you get users and find someone to pay for your product, then you're really not going to succeed. I think that's where my talk is today. Thank you. Questions?
Yeah, go ahead.
I think I'm in agreement with you, first of all, that there seems to be two silos. On one side, the technical people, and on the other side, the business people. Would you say your recommendation to close this gap then is for technical people to take courses in business or become more versed in business skills?
You can do that. Some people find it's not their comfortable forte, right? So they'd rather not do it. I would say you could decide to take courses and, for me, I'm a business person. I'm more interested in seeing a lot more collaboration, right? So within the Hopkins ecosystem, within the Carey ecosystem, I lead the AI club in the Carey Business School. And last year we had a hackathon, right? Most of the business students can code, but we ensured to have a business person in every team. And the team that actually built the best revenue forecasting model for Protanis was Nick Kubitz's startup. The team that built it had only one technical person and 4 MBAs. And technical person was even an undergrad student. There were teams with three PhD data science students who he built a better model because the business insights that they gave him helped them pick the right data set to actually train their model. So you could decide to take those courses, but at the same time, it's important to build your network and have these business people by the side because you never know when they'll come in handy.
You got one over there, Michael.
Yeah. So I'm a different technical person, and one of the things that I see often on the business side is the tail ends up wagging the dog. Business people forget that the thing that makes the money is the tech. And it's like at the end of the day, if the tech walks out the door, you don't have a business. And I feel like a lot of business people forget that. How do you, as a technical person, communicate that, or how do you get business people to remember and respect and not just go for often the bottom line of like how can we get this the cheapest or how can we get it faster, and give the technical people, often creative people, more leeway to do things that are innovative instead of just trying to the race to the bottom, basically. On the business side.
Yes, on the business side. You need people like Mark Cuban who can look at it and say, okay, it's going to cost me this much, but at the end of the day, it's going to make me this much. I don't care how much it costs because the cost outweighs the profits and foreseeing how we can do it, especially the tech side. So, as Julie is saying, having a little bit of training on either side is good, but in my opinion, I have a business background now. It's important to be able to see the future and understand how things are going to be built, and as JP was saying, how much time it's actually going to take. At the same time, you need to have the fundamental understanding of, yes, the tech is what brings in the money, but you need the money to build the tech. So there is a bit of the tail wagging the dog, but there's also one hand shaking the other, and both sides thrive.
That's not been an experience in the industry at all. Like that's a very unique experience.
This is my experience. This is my idea.
Okay.
This is how I do it.
And my question is like, as a person on the technical side, how do you help the business-minded people see the value of having a little bit of leeway, having a little bit more fluff, I guess, in the budget of the schedule to like innovate and bring in even potentially more money, maybe not immediately, but in the future.
Daniel, if you want to.
So I would say it depends on the stage of your company, right? If you're a startup that's trying to lean, you don't have a lot of money, it can be quite tough to have all that leeway to be quite experimental. You need to be sure that you have enough money to run your company in the next 2 to 3 years, perhaps when your next raise. You have companies like OpenAI and other, you have Zuck. I was reading an article today about the amount of money Zuck has spent on the Meta LLM is spent over 42 billion on their AR, VR systems. And that's because Meta as a company has that allowance of money to spend. At the stage of your company, you might not have all that money to spend. So the business people want your company to succeed. They don't want you to run out of money. So while you want to be innovative, you also need to think about the fact that you need your company to continue existing for you to be innovative and bring in more money. So it's a really tough question to answer, but I think it also has to do with the kind of people that you have on your team, right? So if you really have a great culture fit, your business people and yourself should be able to come to a compromise on how you're going to balance creativity and financial objectivity.
Yeah, to answer Kevin's question, to be honest with you, the business I've always been in, I was struggling with the business and the technical person. That's the technical person. That's just not true with most companies. So it's probably better for the technical person that does someone who knows the business side. Yeah. The technical person will be like that, but being able to find somebody who's following their vision is the tricky part.
We're just finding more whether more popular, whether more accepted, or people who are interested in exploring.
This is a hot one. All right, guys, thank you. Hopefully the next one is less contentious. No, capitalism is a problem. Okay.
Thank you. Hopefully this is actually more contentious. My name is Jim Keeney. I run a company called DAP. It's a tech company. Okay, let me... So this is a proposal for a new way of thinking about capitalism, which is a system. And so I'm bringing the systems approach to capitalism and the way we think about it. What it's not, this is not academically rigorous, this presentation. I welcome anybody's criticisms. But the idea here is to stimulate thought and start a dialogue. So this is my definition of capitalism. It's an amoral and apolitical system that uses human motivators, fear and greed, to maximize the exploitation of resources. The footnote at the bottom, though, is important because capitalism currently motivates the exploitation of resources, but it doesn't account for the cost of that exploitation. Sorry, got to push harder. So we should view, therefore, capitalism as a system for governing the flow of capital. Okay? Power within the system is therefore measured by control over that flow of capital or information about that flow of capital. More capital, more power. So again, capitalism is a system. Don't confuse it with markets. Markets are political constructs and they're designed to regulate capitalism. Political systems are also designed, they're systems, to maintain the illusion of shared cooperation. So a vastly different thing than capitalism itself. They specifically evolve these political systems to support and promote a defined common good. And of course, we all argue about what is that common good, but that's basically what they're there for. It's to convince you all to buy into the illusion that we're all working together. Okay. So we're going to focus on capitalism, and we're going to focus specifically on the fact that capitalism is an unbalanced system right now with a tendency to aggregate wealth. And there's a lack of a corresponding system for the reinvestment of that wealth. So let's just use as an example, very easy example, Amazon. It controls over 37% of the e-commerce market. That represents over 600 million products for sale. The website receives 2 billion visitors per month and over 500 billion in sales, which is greater than 1.4 billion per day. Okay, that generates over $40 million in net cash per year, and it represents over 1.6 million transactions per day. So each transaction equals a flow of capital. This is the flow of capital, as I said. For each small transaction,
it grows up to even larger capital transactions, but eventually ending in that going to Amazon's bottom line. And that's the aggregation of capital that I'm talking about. So you can visualize it this way. Whole bunch of transactions leading up to Amazon. So when we look at a system of the flow of capital across all businesses in the US, it's a very complex system. It is complex enough that we can consider it a natural system. Like all natural systems, it's governed, it's evolving, and it's nonlinear, and it's governed by the sciences of chaos and complexity. And those systems, those natural systems, they consistently follow patterns that we see everywhere. And I highly recommend everybody get a copy of the book Design in Nature. So this guy has proposed that natural systems, the flow of things within natural systems tend to fall into patterns, and those patterns reproduce themselves. Trees, roots, deltas, rivers, all these things follow consistent patterns. Therefore, we can use our understanding of these natural patterns to evaluate capitalism. The first observation is it's unbalanced. It's all going in one direction, and it gets aggregated there. The aggregation of capital has no corresponding counterflow. To restore the balance, there must be an equally robust mechanism to equitably distribute this aggregated wealth back to the sources. In natural systems, unbalanced flow patterns lead to catastrophic disruptions until balance is restored. So the price here is, if it continues to happen, things will catastrophically fail. And typically that leads to bad things. So what we want to do is change that one direction to something more natural, where both you have the flow up and the flow back down. Investment systems are the counterflow of aggregation. Current investment systems lack the breadth and dynamism of the aggregation systems. You can think of three big ones right off the bat: equity markets, government spending programs, private equity, and venture capital. All these systems are hegemonic. A few people are regulating them, controlling them, and making decisions about how things flow. Obviously not a natural system. An investment counterflow system. We need one that is as complex and far-reaching and adaptive as the aggregation side. Okay? It must, at a minimum, have a reach as broad as the aggregation system. Everyone, everywhere, equally. Okay? Governance must be equally applied and locally responsive. Interestingly, not geographically locally, because we're past that. It can be topic-oriented. It can be, whatever brings people commonly together. And it must generate risk-return profiles that attract investors, because we're still working within the capitalist system, which works on fear and greed. So we're working on the greed side. So my objective is to start a dialogue here. I have ideas, lots of ideas, about what that counterflow system would look like. But I wanted to give a presentation to introduce the idea, start the dialogue, and see where we go from there. I believe we have the technologies, we have the social structures, we have the traditions to solve the problem. We're just not looking at it the right way. And so that's the purpose of this conversation. I got 2 minutes remaining. Go ahead. I can go back.
No, you're good. If you can project.
I will.
It seems like you're trying to find a way to better distribute the wealth within the capitalist system so that is equally distributed amongst both the providers and consumers.
Yes.
But how do you provide the incentive for the money to flow back when Amazon is just sitting there? They can't make any more money even if they have a printing press within their server.
So put yourself in the shoes of Amazon, or put yourself in the shoes of a third world country, because 2008 was a manifestation of a counterflow. There was excess of capital within the third world. They couldn't find any safe harbor, so they kept investing in U.S. bonds. So bond traders had an incentive to create more and more complex bonds. Okay? All they're looking for is a safe harbor. So right now, if you're in Amazon's position, what do? Okay, you turn to venture capital and you invest in a whole bunch of companies. That's just a perpetuation of the hegemony, and it doesn't distribute it far enough. So what you're asking is, can we create a counterflow system that has that equity and that broad reach, okay, but at the same time has a risk-reward profile that a company like Amazon is looking for? And remember, if they're sitting on $40 billion worth of cash, they're not looking for 150% return. They may be looking for 3%. They're not looking for you. They just want to preserve it so that they can reinvest it later on. Same thing with, again, the third world countries. What is little known about 2008 is the real driver behind the whole thing is third world kind of equity that they own went from 25 trillion to 50 trillion in the space of 30 years. And they were constantly trying to find places to put that. That was kind of the end of it. And again, the answer was a lack of capital.
Yeah, like you were saying about us just earning 3%. I'm not sure that that would be
sufficient.
But yeah. But at the same time, I think the elephant in the room is taxes. They're not high enough. That is
so
redistributed wealth.
Yeah. So what you're saying is, hey, can we redistribute the wealth using government?
Yes.
Right. The problem with government is it isn't as dynamic as the aggregation system, right? It is, again, funneling things into one pot, disconnecting it between how it was acquired and how it's distributed. And it forces a group of people to make decisions about how that gets distributed.
Yeah.
Right? So it doesn't have the dynamism, and it doesn't have the natural systematism, which is adaptive
oversight in general. Right?
Sorry?
There has to be some kind of oversight of money in general.
Okay, so that'll be my next presentation. I have ideas. I suggest you read up on the Germain thing. It's kind of you've been waiting to that's good.
I was just going to say, if fear is a motivator, then why could people model and forecast what happens if we don't start regulating?
That's a good point. And people are, like Bernie Sanders exists. There are people in society right now.
Repeat what she said for the rest of the
Oh, sorry. She's saying, so capitalism, fear, and greed, right? So the fear side is, there's this catastrophe on the horizon. That's the fear side of this equation, right? Kind of two reasons why I don't think we're wrestling with it. Number one is it's too abstract and too far in the future. It's a black swan concept.
Watching too much Fallout, so I just thinking about exactly.
Exactly. And we do know from past history that we've been able to weather economic shocks of sufficient, of this kind of size without, war. Although it eventually did lead to war. I'm not saying the apocalypse is around the corner. I'm just saying, hey, we got to do something about this. It's a natural system that's breaking down, and there's pressure on the system. Right.
It's probably the last one. Yeah, if you had a single hypothetical silver bullet solution, could you name just one thing that would help?
So I actually hinted at it in that slide. Okay, I think so. First off, we need broad distribution, right? So that's where blockchain comes into effect because it's trustless. Everybody's shaking their heads. That's fine. We can have that debate. But you have to have some system in which everybody is involved. But most importantly, there's a ton of economic activity that is not part of that aggregation process, right? Especially in the third world where people work for $3 a day. An awful lot of the economic activity that they participate in goes unregistered. Okay, so we have to do something about that. All right. Once you do something about that, if you have kind of a universal blockchain or ledger concept, right, then you can have something to invest in that distributes across that broad, that broad scope. So that kind of solves the problem of reach. Okay. The second one, though, and the reason why I mentioned Germain Bank is you've got regulation problems, right? You can't just give money to people and hope for the best. So, and we know that, just throughout history. So what Germain Bank does is they specifically target groups, and those groups are self-regulating. So think of them as a response cell, okay? They're an organized cell that kind of maintains themselves. So then what happens is the money is distributed universally to the cells. The cells are the ones that figure out how to invest amongst themselves, okay? And then what you have to do is build into the system some sort of monitoring to say, hey, this one's a cancerous cell. So we've got to kind of cut it off from that flow. It gets much more complicated than that, but those are some early kind of concepts. Does that help? Okay, cool.
Thanks, Jim.